Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa McGurk, one of the international trade managers at the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Today is our sixth session with Global Sales Mentor Zach Selch. And today we're switching the topic up a little bit. This is really a critical part of global business development. Today, Zach is going to be focusing on trade shows and really maximizing your ROI. He'll be transitioning from the preparation phase to navigating while you're there. And then, of course, the follow-up with his tips and tricks for maximizing impact. Today, I'm going to welcome you to join the chat by telling us who you are. You can interact with one another. Who knows, maybe some of you are planning to go to a trade show that would be the same and you can meet up. So if you have a trade show event, that would be fun to enter as well. Just so you know, last session we had some technical difficulties. I will be keeping in touch with everyone over email if anything should happen during the session. Just a reminder that we have continuous export education programs with our team. We also are always recruiting for delegation trade shows and trade missions. So please check out the EDPNC events page to look forward to how your goals and might have some synergies with what we're planning. And then we also have consultants available in some strategic markets to assist you. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen and allow Zach to prepare his presentation for today. Thanks for joining us again, Zach.
Thank you, Melissa. And let me see if this goes up. Great. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks a lot. I'm going to jump into this. Before I do, I'm going to mention a couple of quick things because this is the last of a series. I put in the chat 3 links, one of which would allow you to set up an hour coaching session with me. So feel free to jump into that if you want. The Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina has made an arrangement with me to allow for coaching for companies. So if you are a company or a person from North Carolina and you want to enjoy an hour of coaching, feel free to use that link. You can also find my LinkedIn profile link, so you can reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and my email. Okay. If you haven't been to the last couple of sessions or any of these sessions, I have really, really good notes for the sessions. I will have really good notes from this session. So if you want, just send me an email and I will make sure to get you the notes from all the sessions. And the last thing is, again, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina has arranged for you to have access to my online course. It's a 40-hour course on international sales, international business. I don't think there's anything like it in the world. So if you reach out, but that you have to do through Melissa. If you reach out through Melissa or somebody else from the EDPNC, I will give you access to that, and that's free to you. That's covered by North Carolina. Okay, so that's just a few little things I wanted to mention since this was the last session. Okay, if anybody has questions, shoot them up in the chat. I will hope to try and get some time at the end to answer questions. But now I'm just going to jump into it. Okay, let me see. Okay, so if you have been to any of my sessions before, basically, these are some of the things I always say, and you'll see how this relates later on. Everything that I do and everything that I'm going to teach and everything that I talk about is about increasing your international sales revenue, right? I'm not in this to win prizes or to travel more. I traveled enough, right? What we're trying to do is increase revenue. So I'm going to tie everything up to the idea of increasing your international sales revenue. There are essentially 3 ways to do that, right? To grow your total addressable market, that means get in more markets with the right partners, increase your partner's sales hours, and increase your partner's sales competency. That's it. You increase those three things and you increase sales. It is very close to complete correlation. You double your sales hours, you will double your sales. You double the markets you're in, you will double your sales. You double your competency, you'll double your sales. So that's what we're trying to do always with everything we do. Okay. And again, I'm going to tell you some things which probably don't sound terribly intuitive. Other people might disagree with what I say. Why do I think you should listen to me? Well, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've onboarded more than 1,400 distributors around the world. I've sold in 135 markets. I had 125 quarters where I beat quota, and I've brought in about $1 billion, over $1 billion in purchase orders. So in general, I would listen to me if I were you, but that's your call. Okay. And what we're trying to do is get you right in the middle of this Venn, selling in all the correct markets, engaged, competent, and accountable distributors, and that you have all the systems and the cadence of accountability in place. Okay. So now let's jump into the concept of trade shows. Okay. Why do trade shows matter? Well, about 70% of global international cross-border sales are going to be influenced by trade shows. This gives you an opportunity to meet end users, private buyers, and most importantly, in my opinion, your distributors, and it builds credibility. And again, I don't necessarily like to talk about things from sort of like a business development or a marketing or a fluffy type of perspective. But credibility is very important when you're dealing with international business, right? People want to know that you are committed to these markets, that you'll be available, that they can find you, that you're going to continue to sell. And being at trade shows, that is a source of credibility. Okay. Before we do anything, what we want to do is we want to understand why we're going, right? What are the revenue goals? What are we trying to achieve? What would success look like? Okay. And we want to make sure everybody who goes is completely aligned with those goals. And that might sound, again, maybe redundant, maybe counterintuitive, right? But um, are you looking to sign a distributor in India? Do you want a distributor in Germany, right? Do you have distributors? Do you want to replace distributors? Are you looking to talk to end users, right? Those are questions that everybody who's getting on a plane should know the answer to before they get on a plane, right? Because you don't want to have mess ups, arguments, etc. on the ground once you get there. And you really do want to be focused. If you cannot sell in Europe and you're going, let's say you're going, I've been going for years to one of the biggest trade shows in the world in Europe, but distributors from all over the world come there. Now, very often a company can't legally sell in Europe because they don't have the right registration or the right paperwork. And they are there to talk to distributors from the Middle East or from Asia. Everybody on the booth should know that, because what you don't want is to waste time talking to somebody and then say, by the way, I can't sell in your market, right? Um, you should understand the investment. Okay. A minute of a booth typically is in the hundreds of dollars, right? So you should be able to rattle that number off, right? When you take into account you have 4 people or 8 people, they flew in, they're staying at hotels, they're eating, they've lost work, all that. You're spending maybe $30,000 for the real estate of the booth. You're spending maybe another $10,000, $15,000 for the build of the booth, right? All these things add up, and you should know how much every minute costs you on that booth. And everybody on the booth should know that, because if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it's a waste of money. Okay. You should be tracking leads, and everything you get should be tracked. And one thing I'll say is you very often get your best lifetime customers out of a trade show. Okay. Choosing the right shows. We often get pulled into these very, very big shows. Sometimes they're right for us, sometimes they're not. Sometimes a big show is sort of necessary because you need to show your presence. Sometimes you want to be in regional shows. Now, typically as a manufacturer, I only go to shows for the past 20 years or so. I go to shows where I want to talk to my distributors, right? I don't necessarily go to shows where I want to talk to end users. End user shows, I want my distributors to be paying for, okay? Because that's sort of their job. So what we want to do is we want to figure out where the right shows are for the people that I want to talk to, okay? You can buy an attendee list from last year, and then you can look through it and say, okay, these are the people I want to see. Okay. And that's a pretty good investment if you're not familiar with the show. It is pretty critical. I can't tell you how often I talk to people who say this wasn't the right show. I just spent $40,000 and this wasn't the right show. So you really do, want to think about that pretty carefully. Know who your buyers and distributors are before your booking. Um, Again, depending on what you're doing, I very seldomly go to a trade show without knowing the best distributors in the markets that I'm interested in working with, right? So if I don't have distributors in 10 countries, and those are the countries I'm looking for, before I go to that show, I will know who they are and I will have reached out to them. That is a good way of doing business, right? You want to be able to say, okay, this guy is coming to my booth. I know that it's somebody I want to work with. It's not just random people. Um, and that comes down to pre-show outreach. I will do a lot of outreach before a show, right? First of all, I want to know who I want to meet. And typically now I've never really sold a lot of consumer goods, right? So if you're selling $100 fast moving product, maybe there are 1 million people who can buy your product and you're going to sell at your show and you really want to reach a lot of people, that's one thing. If you're selling, let's say, to hospitals or mines or agricultural organizations, and you know which markets are good for you. I was working recently with a client who does corn processing equipment. Okay. Now, in most countries, there really are only a handful of large organizations, companies that process corn. So you can know in advance who the 100 companies you want to talk to in Europe are. There aren't 1,000, there are 100. They're actually a little bit less. So you can know who they are and you can reach out and say, hey, I would like to set up a meeting with you beforehand, before the show, right? You can ask them to come by. Maybe they'll set an appointment with you, maybe they won't, but they will know that you want to talk to them and they will know who you are, where you are, and you will know when they come in the booth, especially if you let everybody on the booth know that that is somebody that you wanted to talk to. Okay. I so I haven't been a VP of sales for a couple of years. I've been running my own business. I consult and advise and do fractional work for a lot of companies. But when I was a VP of sales, I would typically have 40 meetings booked for a 4-day trade show before I even got on a plane, right? I would make sure that I had all these meetings set up. I would leave maybe a third of the time of the day open for things that came up during the show, but I wanted everything to be set up beforehand. Now, I'll tell you, I know that the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina has resources that can help you with this. The federal government has resources that can help you with this. I can help you with this. There are a lot of people out there who can help you with this if you don't know how to do it. But if you can identify who the people are that you want to meet, you can find them. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can find their emails. You can find their telephone numbers, right? What's key is knowing really what it is that you want to achieve at this trade show and planning it out in advance. Okay. Again, build a schedule. Um, Build this around meetings at the booth, right? You can do 15 or 20-minute meetings and back to back, starting from the beginning, right? You can book all your meals. I typically book all my meals at a trade show. I'll tell you I'll talk a little bit about entertainment later. I will book every meal, every dinner for my trade show. I'll book the restaurant a year in advance. So if I'm at a trade show in November, before I leave that show, I'm booking my restaurants for the next year. So I can say to people, I am doing German food on Thursday. Would you like to come? Right? I'm doing Lebanese food on Tuesday. I'm doing Italian food on Wednesday, right? And I will have, restaurants set up. I will invite people, and it's a great way to spend more time with people. And then what you want to do is you want to balance out new prospects and current partners. I'm very heavy on meeting with my existing partners, but that's typically because I've been doing this for a while and I had the partners. But as you want to add new people, you want to mix up those meetings, right? But you want to build this before you go to the show. The type of collateral you do, right? Keep in mind, this should be designed for at least for shows, but maybe even for this particular show. You can build up collateral for shows. Flash drives were a great thing for a long time. Nowadays, even just putting together a QR code and a landing page for this show that has a file of documents that you want to leave, short videos, explainer videos, things like that, and also printed material, right? Testimonials, references are very helpful in today's world, right? You can give somebody a little piece of paper with a QR code on it that will lead to 10 videos where the videos are each short testimonial videos, right? That's a fantastic thing to give people at a trade show. Okay. Um, in terms of like product demos, I'm going to talk about that, but you want this scripted out so that everybody on the booth is doing the demo exactly the same way. And that way should be the way that you want that demo to be given to address your target market's pain points, right? Booth design. This is a very dear subject to me. Okay. There are essentially three primary things that you can do at a booth. You can attract new customers, right? Or you can attract people who don't know who you are. You can have meetings with people who do know who you are, right? You can do demos. And actually, I'll throw in a fourth thing, and you can sort of provide um, hospitality to your friends, to your distributors, to other people, right? We very often think only of showing off to people who don't know who we are, right? And so we make it we focus on that with the booth. But depending on your situation, depending on how long you've been working, depending on what you're trying to achieve, maybe what you want is more seating space, more meetings. One of my favorite booth designs that I've seen, it's for a company based out of Minnesota called Nonan. I know the woman who designed the booth for them, but it's a smallish booth with six separate private meeting areas. So the meeting areas are small, they're closed on two sides, but they still give a little bit of privacy. But you can have six meetings going on at the same time in a relatively small booth. So if what you're trying to do is a lot of meetings, you want more meeting space. If what you're trying to do is to bring out a message to people who have no idea who you are, then you want maybe more open space with more graphics. Now, one thing I will say though is that people like to put hundreds of words of graphics up, and nobody's going to read it. What you need is if what you want is to display this and show it off to people who don't know who you are, you really want short, snippy, big. When you design this, you want to take a really good look at the map and understand where people are flowing from, how they're going to walk. Because I've seen a lot of times booths that are literally 180 degrees flipped, and their back is facing the traffic because the people who designed the booth weren't aware of how the traffic flowed. So you want to have a feel for that. You want to basically get a feel for what it would look like from every angle. So you know that if people are approaching it from one way, is it just going to look like a blank wall, or what it's going to look like? Okay. So these are the type of things that I'm thinking of when I'm designing a booth. Giveaways. Giveaways are very, very powerful, but think about all the stuff you've thrown away at the end of a show, all the trash cans that are just full of giveaways, right? So you got to think about what right now for the past 10 or 15 years are things that people can take and bring home and give to their kids because that actually makes a connection and they remember it and it's going to be in their household, even if it's not on their desk. It is really, really difficult to think of something that's good enough to get in a person's pocket and stay there, right? So what you want to try and find is the next best thing, something that they're going to give to their kid, maybe. Tea prep and training. This is really important. What I'm going to say is very often I see people end up going to a trade show and they need to take so there was a question I'll you know what I'm gonna actually I'll go back to that question in a bit because that'll go back to hospitality. Sorry. Um so we want to train everybody. You might get people coming here who are tech like I don't want to sound dismissive, but technical people. You need to have specific technical resources on the booth or those type of things who aren't necessarily salespeople. Make sure everybody on the booth is very well trained. They should understand what they're supposed to be doing. One of the best concepts I was ever exposed to in terms of booth work and booth discipline is something called a message board. I worked once for a NASDAQ 100 company and we had fantastic marketing people, and a lot of people were from the military. So we had really good discipline. But what would happen would be there would be a message board, a big, at this point, this was a big cardboard board up in the trade show booth and in the hotels for breakfast every day. And it had the primary goals of the show, what we were trying to achieve, what our primary messages were. Now, I'll tell you something that sounds sort of silly, right? But I worked for a company a while back that was founded around 1919. Now, I say around 1919 because what happened was it was founded and several other companies were founded by the two founders between about 1919 and 1945. And those companies sort of merged and became one company. But if you said to somebody, if you heard somebody telling the story of the company, one person would say, well, the company was founded in 1919. Somebody else might say the company was founded in 1942. And if you heard both of those stories the same day at the same booth, well, it sounds like somebody's, making something up, right? So it is important to make sure that we keep, how many employees does the company have? What's the primary business of the company? Where's the company's headquarters? When was the company founded? Who were the founders? Those type of things, you want to make sure everybody is in alignment and is saying the same thing. You want to make sure if we're not interested in selling in Europe because we do not have a regulatory certification for Europe this year, everybody should know that. Nobody should be wasting time trying to set up a European distributor or talk to a European customer, right? It should be very, very clear what you're saying. Also, I like to say to people, okay, if a competitor comes in, this is what we're going to say to them. And I don't throw people out of my booth usually. What I'll typically say to competitors is I'll say, look, we're really busy. We would like you to come back tomorrow just before opening. If you come back half an hour before opening, I will give you a personal demo of our system and I'll run you through our materials. But we're trying to keep the booth flowing right now and we're a little busy. And I tell people to say the same thing to everybody like that, right? If somebody does come in who doesn't know what we do or who is clearly not a customer, then also I want a message for that. I'll say, okay, you say, well, this is what we do. 3 sentences. Can I give you a pen? and you walk them off the booth, right? You just try and keep people from cluttering up your booth if they're not supposed to be there. But this discipline and this training is really critical. Okay. The concept of a booth captain. I'm ex-military. I'm a big believer in doing things military way. I like to have a captain on the booth at all times. And what that means is there is always somebody in charge. If there is a decision to be made, we all know who is supposed to make that decision at that time. Now, I spent half of my career as a VP. When I was at a show in the Middle East, the booth captain was usually the regional sales manager for the Middle East. So was in Latin America. He was a regional sales manager for Latin America, right? We set this up beforehand. And when he said jump, I said how high, right? That's the way it should be. Now we should also be able to say that if the booth captain is leaving the booth for lunch, well, who takes over? There should always be a booth captain on the booth. And I set up the schedule before the show, right? So let's say I know that I need a greeter, I need somebody to do demos. There's going to be somebody doing meetings on the booth, right? So I have a team of 8 people. I'm going to make sure that there are always 4 people on the booth. I'm going to tell everybody when they're on the booth and when they have time off. Now, I'll tell you what, if you tell people before the show when they're going to have time off, then people don't cut out to buy presents or because they really want to see the Eiffel Tower or something like that, right? If they know when they have time off, they will be on the booth and be 100% engaged, and then they'll do their non-booth activities, when they're supposed to. Also, you want to basically say, okay, so you might be doing demos one day and you might be greeting people one day, right? Or you might be doing demos part of the morning, but then you have 4 meetings, one after the other, that kind of thing. So everybody should know what they're supposed to be doing when they are on, the booth. You would be astonished how many adults forget that they don't have a valid passport, they don't have a visa. I went to a trade show once about close to 20 years ago, and one of the team members put the wrong date on his visa. So when we got to the airport, they literally stopped him and put him in a cell for 8 hours until the day flipped because his visa was only valid the following day. So you want to make sure that everything is covered if people need vaccinations, for instance. And it might seem silly that somebody has to double check on a bunch of adults that they've done everything they're supposed to, but you would be astonished at how often people mess this up. I'm going to talk a little bit later about demos, but make sure that you have what you need for demo equipment. Sometimes there's a specific tool that you need, and or cabling. I've worked with demos that require Cat5 cabling, and it might be difficult to get Cat5 cabling on a Sunday in Dusseldorf, right? So you want to make sure that you have all of that set up. Now, logistics, hospitality, and culture. Now let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, on the booth, are you going to have coffee? Are you going to have cookies? Are you going to have, alcoholic beverages, cold beverages, etc.? Think about all of that. Do you need a little refrigerator for the booth, a little coffee machine? Very often I'll have, a water machine, a coffee machine. Sometimes I'll even have a beer fountain, refrigerator, etc. And having those things on the booth enhances your level of hospitality. You want to have a very good plan for your restaurants and all of that. So somebody asked, do you take more than one distributor out to a restaurant? I like to. Now I'm going to say a general thing that has nothing to do with trade shows or sort of on a tangent to trade shows. When you are doing well, you want your distributors to talk to each other. When you're not doing well, you don't want your distributors to talk to each other. So if you've had a really bad year and nobody's sold anything, and maybe five of your systems have failed, and there you have distributors who have a lot of bad stories to tell about you, maybe you don't want your distributors sitting together and talking at a meal. If your distributors have done well that year, many of them have done well, and nobody's mad at you and nobody has anything bad to say about you, get them together for meals. They will talk about you. Hopefully, they will say good things about you, but they will also make friends among themselves, and it builds up a sense of community. So what I did for years was what I found was I went to this trade show in Germany where I had a lot of Arab distributors coming in, and they don't eat pork. And it was very difficult. You go to most restaurants in a German city, and there's a lot of stuff on the menu that has pork. So I said, okay, I'm going to take everybody to a halal Arabic restaurant one night, and people loved it. And it became a really big thing. Sometimes I would have as many as 100 people for dinner for that one night. So what I did was I had one night at a German restaurant, one night at an Italian restaurant, and one night at a Lebanese restaurant. And I would have all the distributors from the Middle East at the Lebanese restaurant. Most of the European distributors would either be at the German or the Italian restaurant. And sometimes people would double up and they'd come to more than one. It isn't cheap, but it built up a fantastic sense of community. And I'll tell you, if your distributor has 20 principals at the trade show and he's coming to eat two nights at your deal, you have won. You have really gotten a huge amount of mind share from him. And you can prove that you have that mind share because he's joining you for the meals. Okay, I am very rough on my booth. Okay. Like I said, I'm ex-military. I worked in a restaurant for a while as a kid, right? I like the whole, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean type of thing, right? The booth captain is the boss. She is deciding what's going on. I don't like people to be using their phones or sitting in the booth. If you want to walk out in the hallway for a bit, if you have to take a call, I don't let people do work. That's why I give people a schedule. That's why I let them have time. There is nothing worse than going by a booth and seeing four people standing there looking down at their phone, or sitting at a desk and typing. That is not why you spent all this money to come to this trade show. And that's why I like to rotate staff. So if you know that you're doing a 4 hour shift and then you're off 4 hours, you'll do your work later, right? Meeting discipline. If I'm having a meeting, and this is sort of talking about more, not necessarily existing distributors, but people who come in, figure out if you should be talking to them very quickly. I like to come up with a couple of questions for people, which really, if let's say I want to work with a distributor who works in radiology, right? I want two questions that will tell me if he understands radiology or not right away. And if he doesn't answer those, I'm going to get him out of my booth as quickly as possible, right? If I'm looking to talk to end users, it's the same type of thing. I'm going to figure out what can I ask him that will let me know if he's a good, valid customer for me or not as quickly as possible. Right. And that I should be able, if I understand my product and I understand my business well, I should be able to come up with those questions pretty quickly. I want to be able to do a short intro, a little bit longer than an elevator pitch, 10 to 15 minutes. This is what my company does, etc. And let's book a follow-up, right? And if I can get it on the calendar, that's great. If I can say, hey, why don't we talk next Tuesday? Right? Let's put it on the calendar. Thank you very much. And keep it moving. Because, sometimes you go to a trade show and there are people lined up. I don't want people walking away because I was busy talking to somebody else. If I could have done that quicker and more efficiently, and record everything you possibly can. There are a lot of fantastic tools now. There are AI voice tools where either you can say to somebody, do you mind if I record this meeting? People are so used to now recording meetings on Zoom. Most people won't object. But if they do say, hey, I'd rather you didn't record it, that's fine. As soon as they walk around, you give a 2 minute quick voice message that you record, and that'll help you trigger your follow-up. Managing leads. Everything should be scanned and recorded every day, basically. You want to tag things: hot, warm, cold. Is this a distributor? Is this a country I'm interested in, etc.? And you can sync that with HQ. There's always going to be somebody left at HQ who can deal with getting the stuff moving while you're not in the country. Okay, there are lots of different types of software that can do this. I use, actually right now I'm using like 3 different products that will scan business cards. And I use one specifically to scan business cards and put them into my CRM. Let's talk about demos. And for a second, let's talk about the whole concept of demos. Do you need demos, right? And by demo, I mean, I have a product that I brought with me and I'm going to show them my product in the flesh, as it were, right? And I'll tell you something, I'll talk a little bit more about feedback and post-meeting discussions in a little bit because I came up a while back years ago after a trade show. I was like, I don't know that we need demos. And what I find is demos are usually the most expensive thing on your booth. They can be very cumbersome. I used to work with a company where we would take 2 engineers just to set up and make sure that our demo equipment worked. And we would take hundreds of dollars worth of Cat5 cable. The effort just to make sure that we had these demos up and running for the whole show was insane. And I said, I suspect we're not doing a lot of demos. Right after a show, I said, okay, let's talk about this. How many demos did we do? And it turned out we had done something like 5 demos, and none of them had been to an important person. The vast majority of the work on the booth was meetings with existing distributors, or just plain meetings, but nobody really needed a demo. So what we did was the following year, we came with big video screens and beautiful videos of somebody using our products in situ, right? In place. So people could get a feel for what it looked like. They didn't have to touch our product, right? So if you can, you think about that. Think about what you can do if you really need a demo. Maybe you do. There are some products you simply cannot sell without a demo. I was on a trade show booth this year for this company that has these large agricultural equipment, and they had a system that was maybe 1/10 of the size, but it was a fully operating system on the booth, maybe 2 meters long, and it attracted a huge amount of attention because people came and looked at it. It was doing something very interesting. It was vibrating in a certain way, and people came and watched it, and it was very, very powerful. But you have to think about what you are actually getting out of the demo, and if you really need to have a demo system, and if that's worth the return on investment. Now, if you have a demo, let's talk about this. You should try and figure out how to do a short, crisp demo, 3 to 5 minutes if possible, and have it tied to major pain points. What differentiates you from the competition in something that is actually important to the person who's going to be watching it, whether it's an end user or distributor, right? And what kind of things do distributors want to see in a demo? Well, they want to know that it looks good, it's photogenic, right? That they're going to be doing a demo eventually, and they want to know that that demo is going to sell for them, right? They want to understand that it's easy to use, that the maintenance is good, that they're not going to have a problem with buying a demo unit from you and then having it break down, right? Those type of things. But they are going to want to know that this does sell, that it's flashy, it looks good, that it's photogenic, right? Everything I do on the booth is repeatable and scripted. I don't want any improvisations by anybody on my booth, right? So you want to put together these scripts. You want to get people to drill them. You want to make sure that every demo looks like every other demo and they're, crisp, clean, repeatable, no fumbling. Um, Capture questions. When people have questions on the demo, make sure you say, okay, this guy was here, John Smith, he asked this question and this question. Make sure that the salesperson or the person who's going to follow up and reach out to them knows that that person asked those questions. Okay. And then again, think about everything you can cut off of the demo because the demo is a lot of money, a lot of hassle. And again, some percentage of the time, and it is a high percentage, you get a demo there and it doesn't work, right? So you end up with this giant paperweight that's cost you thousands of dollars to move it there. And you have to wonder, could I have simplified? Hosting partners, okay? And I think you got to understand this should be, I'll say when we're talking about working with partners, it's not about having fun, right? It's not about really, about you're really enjoying yourself or having fun. That said, everybody should enjoy themselves, right? You want to really drive up mind share with the distributors. Okay. And it's an opportunity to see them at dinner. I'll tell you a quick story, which people who know me have heard this before many times, possibly. Um, a while back, I decided to take a third of my booth, which cost about 15 to 17K, just in terms of real estate. I took a third of my booth and I made it into a distributor salesperson hospitality booth. So I cut out a lot of the demo space in my booth. I cut out a lot of other things and I made this area. It had two couches, a little refrigerator, a beer pump, a coffee machine, a water machine. And I said to people, now I go to this trade show every year in November in Germany. The wait for the cloakroom where you leave your baggage or your coat is almost an hour. It can be 45 minutes, an hour when you're at peak. So I said to everybody, hey, I have a closet in my booth. You can come by and leave your coats and bags in my booth. And I knew that that meant that they would come by in the morning and they would come by in the afternoon or the evening and they would visit my booth twice a day. And then when they got to my booth, I said, by the way, there's a little space here. If you're ever tired, you can come back and rest. So the salespeople were hanging out in my booth all day. Now, it was a little closed room. So essentially, there was a little bit of privacy. It didn't look too chaotic or like a college dorm room or anything like that, but it created a fantastic sense of community. And the distributor salespeople were at my booth all the time, right? And it drove up mind share. Everybody learned about, because they were talking about sales they had made that year, things they had done with my product. They heard demos over and over again that were going on in the background. It drove up sales dramatically. That 17K investment brought me back probably $17 million, right? So that it isn't for everybody, it isn't for every circumstance, but anything you can do at a trade show to drive up distributor engagement is very important, right? Remember that not everything happens in the booth. You have to be completely focused on what's going on. Um, I like to say, when you go to a trade show, there is a solid chance that there are going to be people in your hotel who are your competitors, who are your customers, who are your distributors. So you want to always be on. You always want to be focused. You always want to look reasonable, and you always want to be looking for people, right? A lot of deals happen in hotels. I know a guy who hasn't had a booth in a trade show for years. He will get the closest nice hotel to the trade show, and he'll get a suite, and he'll set up a hospitality suite in the hotel, and that's where he does all of his business. It's always worthwhile to attend the receptions and the various side events. Um, Time wasters, tire kickers, etc. I am really brutal about getting people out of my booth. What I find is people will I've sold a lot of products where people just don't know what we do, right? And they're pretty esoteric. People will come into the booth and they'll say, "What do you do?" And I will find a very polite way to walk them off the booth. I'll hand them a pen, I'll put my arm around them, and I'll walk them off the booth. Thank you very much for coming by, right? I want to focus on people who I can do business with, right? And it's very, very important to have exit lines and be prepared to get people off your booth. Market intelligence. First of all, you and all your teams should visit your competitors' booths, collect brochures, learn everything you can in a very open way. It isn't unheard of, and I've done it myself, to either bring a specialist who's a technical person or an engineer or something like that, who doesn't spend any time at your booth and who will be 100% focused on gathering business intelligence. Or you could hire somebody. There are lots of consultants who that's what they do, is they come in and they gather intelligence on your competitors, in a legal way, but they typically have no connection to your booth. They don't do a shift on your booth, anything like that. They just focus on gathering intelligence. And at most of these big trade shows, that's the perfect opportunity. Um, I'm very hands-on in terms of managing the team. I want to make sure that I know what's going on, that the team is doing what they're supposed to, etc. I will have daily booth meetings. Um, we'll talk about leads and we'll refine tactics. If things aren't working well, we can make adjustments in the middle of the show and talk about things. We can, recognize wins. Bob did a great job today. Everybody, clap your hands for Bob, right? But you really want to make sure that you are managing, it isn't just everybody showing up, doing what they think is the right thing, and then going out and, getting drunk in the evening. That isn't what the show is all about, right? It's about making sure that we are staying on. And likewise, I like to do a 15-minute end of day briefing. Now, I'll tell you this, I'll have it in a bar sometimes, right? I'll have it over dinner. I'm not saying you have to do this, standing up in the cold at the booth. You can do it sitting down with a beer in front of you or a drink in front of you, but I do want to talk about the day every day, go over what happened, and make sure that we're all set for the next day. And we've, aligned the next day's priorities, and we've fixed, any small issues that might come up. Somebody might say, well, we don't have a stapler, and I haven't been stapling cards to lead sheets all day because we don't have a stapler. And if they didn't mention it, maybe nobody would fix it. But you can go out and buy some staples the next morning, right? There are little things that you can fix to make sure everything's going right. You just have to make sure that people talk to you about it and they know about it. I like to do an immediate follow-up. This is everybody's kryptonite, right? Because you come back from a trade show, you're tired, everybody's tired, everybody wants to get home to their family, the work is piled up, right? So think about what you can do to prep for this. Now, I'll tell you something else is think about the time of the year, think about your schedule. I have a trade show every year that takes place the week before Thanksgiving. So I come home the Sunday of Thanksgiving, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Now I've been out of the office for a week. So now I have, Monday and Tuesday, I'm getting, I'm covering the stuff that I missed because I was out of the office for a week. Wednesday, I'm already thinking about Thanksgiving. Thursday, Friday, I'm off. It's another weekend, right? Now I'm in December. And on, say, the 15th of December, a lot of people are shutting down their mind share for the year. So now I have basically a 2-week window of opportunity to touch people between my big trade show and the time that they're going away for the holidays, or they're shutting their mind down for the holidays. So if I don't get to them, that pulls us into the 6th of January. when they're really focused and back at their desk. That's my problem. I've been dealing with this for years. So what I do is I get everything ready before I go to this trade show so I can send it out. And when they come back from Thanksgiving, they have heard from me with everything I promised them, right? And what I do is because of again, this is a little trick that I do because of the dates. I like to send out an advent calendar because that's a little Christmas related gift that's supposed to go out around the 1st of December. And that advent calendar has gotten me a huge amount of business over the years, right? So that's what you want is you want people to remember you. You want to be prepared so you can send out these thank yous, you can send out these follow-ups and have everything ready before the show so you're not struggling with it when you get back. Lead nurturing. Again, you can prepare everything you want in terms of like sequence emails, calls, etc. But you want to make sure everything gets entered into the CRM as quickly as possible and everything gets assigned to somebody. So you know who is supposed to be dealing with it, right? A great thing to do at trade shows is distributor evaluation. Um, again, some people do no distributor evaluation. If I walk up to their booth and say, "Hey, I would like to be your distributor in Portugal," they hand me a contract to sign, right? I don't work that way. What you want is to make sure that you're finding the best distributor in the markets that you want to work in, right? So first, you want to make sure that you have an ideal distributor profile. If you don't have a distributor profile, look at my previous lectures for EDPNC, and there I discussed the distributor profile, right? So you build up a distributor profile before the show, and everybody on the booth should know your ideal distributor profile so that you're prepared for that. Okay, so does this distributor match my ideal distributor profile? You can use a show to verify claims. You can say, "Hey, you told me that you also work with this manufacturer and that manufacturer, and they happen to have booths right down the hallway. Do we want to walk down there and you can introduce me to the sales manager of this company? And I'd love to see, what he has to say about you, right? It's a fantastic opportunity to check references. Very often end users are there. You can say, "Hey, you told me you were selling to King Hussein Hospital, and I know the purchasing manager from King Hussein happens to be at the show. Do you want to maybe set up a quick chat so I can get to know him and see that you have this relationship," right? These are things you can do at a show. Um, I always say my uncle in the Ministry of Health, right? You talk to all these distributors and say, "Oh, I'd be the best distributor for you. My uncle is in the Ministry of Health." Well, I want to be able to verify these things. I want to get a feel for it. Now, you also get a feel for a person's character if you have dinner with them a couple of times or you spend a little bit of time with them. And a trade show is a great opportunity to get to know people a little, get to know people, especially people who are going to be as important to you as a distributor in a key market. Um, Turning leads into purchase orders. It's all about momentum. Do not lose momentum. This is really, really important. Um, you can basically say, "Hey, can we set up, can we set up a reference site visit? Can we set up a demo in your hometown? Can we come in and talk to your purchasing team? What can we do as a next step right away? Can we get it on the calendar?" Okay. And you want to engage your customer, your distributors with this, right? If you're talking to an end user, can you say, "Okay, we have the distributor, we have the end user, we're all here together. Can we set up a meeting 2 weeks from now with your purchasing team to discuss this, etc." Keep that momentum flowing. I say here about discounts, I'm not a big discount guy, but typically for trade shows, I'll say, "Hey, as somebody who was at this trade show, I'm going to give you a 25% discount if you close this in the next 6 weeks or the next 3 weeks or whatever you want." Because you're giving people this feeling that you're driving a sense of urgency that's related to the trade show to get things moving faster. And, time kills all deals, they say. Um, Internal debrief at the end of every show. I like to do a debrief. I like to catch everybody who was at the show if possible. And I know sometimes people are all flying off to different directions. You try and grab an hour or two with people. It becomes very frantic at the end of a show. People, break apart the show, they pack it, they all want to get home. Try and capture this. Like I said earlier, one of the best things that I discovered at a debrief was basically figuring out that we didn't need to do demos, right? Or we didn't need demo equipment, right? Which saved us a huge amount of money. The whole idea of setting up a distributor lounge sort of came up from discussions from a debrief. Very often we come out of it and say, this 10 different people used a very specific pitch and it didn't really fit the way we wanted to. Should we make a change to that pitch, or get intelligence into our system? All of these things come out of the debrief. Measuring the ROI, the return on investment. Okay, what does that really mean? Well, have we gotten things into the pipeline? Do those turn into deals? What was the overall cost of the show, and what was the return on the show? Right now, for me, it's really, really easy for me to do return on investment for shows and conferences because I'm essentially a consultant. If I pay to go to a show, I know how much business I got from the show. When you're a manufacturer and these things stretch out maybe over years, it's harder to follow, but it is still possible to follow. And you can say, well, I have picked up 6 distributors. I go to the show in November, Medica. Last year, I signed 6 new distributors from the show. Those distributors brought in an aggregate of $6 million in revenue. The show cost me $100,000. The revenue was $6 million. I know more or less what that means, right? And then we decide on returning. Was the ROI positive? Did I make money? Did we hit the strategic goals that I had? And could we spend this money better elsewhere? We could spend money on all sorts of different things. The question is, do we want to spend it on trade shows? I think trade shows are a really good return on investment, but I also recognize there are a lot of trade shows out there, and not every trade show is as good a return on investment, maybe as we would like it to be. Okay, what are the biggest common mistakes at a trade show? Well, sort of showing up and hoping, not being prepared. If there's one theme running through this, it's being prepared. I will go to a trade show, a 4-day trade show, 32 hours. I will know what I'm doing every minute of every day, both on the booth and off the booth. I know everything that I'm doing at that trade show. I know everything my team members are doing. I know everybody we want to meet. I know everybody we want to meet who we haven't set meetings up with, right? All of that stuff is all planned. Poor booth behavior. I've seen fights at booths. I've seen, people joking around. I've seen people, showing inappropriate affection at booths, right? There are all sorts of things that happen at booths that shouldn't happen. Your booth should be clean. It should be professional. It should look great. People should look at it and say, I know exactly what that company does, and I want to do business with them because they just look so professional. That's the way your booth should look. And anything that damages that look or that reputation is not what you want. And no follow-ups or dead leads, right? You talk to people and they say, oh, I have this bag full of business cards, but we never got around to answering them. That happens to everybody, and it's just a waste of money. If you spend, 40 or $50,000 on a trade show, and then you end up with 1,000 business cards, but you didn't get a chance to do anything with them, then that's just a big shame. Um, Discipline at trade shows. Again, one thing you probably noticed from what I'm saying is I'm a big fan of discipline. I didn't even mention this, but dress code, right? I like to say that basically from the time you leave home on a business trip until the time you get back home, you belong to the company. You're on the company's time. I know not everybody believes that, right? And it's a valid argument not to believe that. But from my perspective, I want to make sure that you are representing the company well the whole time. And that includes what you wear. I'll set a dress code for the booth. And maybe we've become a lot more relaxed since COVID. But still, I don't want jeans. I don't want sneakers. I don't want anything sloppy. I personally like to wear a suit at a trade show booth, and I like, for the other men to be wearing suits. Some women wear suits, some women wear dresses. There are different things to wear. You don't want to wear. I know a woman who wears very, very revealing clothing at the trade show booth, and I don't think that's a very professional thing to do. I think you really just want to be as professional as possible. Shows are work, they're not vacations. That is why I like to give people their schedule ahead of time and time so they know, you know, if you're very often people on your team, they might not travel that much. And this might be the only time in their life they're going to get to Paris or the only time in their life they're going to get to Berlin. And if you don't give them a little bit of time on the schedule, they might just steal some time from time they're supposed to be on the booth. So you want to give them that time, right? That said, shows are work. They're not vacation, right? You need to be at the booth when you're supposed to be at the booth, fully focused on the booth and not thinking too much about, your fun. Um, your distributors and your customers will probably want to have a lot more fun than you do. They're going to want to go out and party, they're going to want to go out drinking, etc. And you're going to have to pay for that, right? You're probably going to have to invite people out drinking and not do much drinking yourself, or at least certainly that's been my life, right? Very often, I'll go out and have a $2,000 bar bill and have, one drink myself that I nursed over 4 hours. But that's just the way it goes, right? You want to be focused. You want to make sure that your mind is sharp, that you're not hungover. That said, you also want to make sure that your customers, your end user customers and your distributors feel that you're providing them very nice hospitality. Um, Now I'll balance that out with something, right? Years ago, I had a guy, a regional sales manager, and he had about 12 or 14 good distributors from his territory at that show who really, really wanted to party. And the guy was dead tired by the end of the week because I had him on the show too many hours. And this goes back to the debrief. We talked about it, and I said, okay, you weren't. I said you were too tired. You were partying too much. And he explained. He said to me, he goes, Zach, my business for this week is entertaining and hospitality with my distributors. And I said, you know what? You are 100% right. I was wrong. You were right. And for the 8 years or so after that we worked together, I didn't put him on the show for more than a couple of hours a day and always in the afternoon. So his job was to be there to entertain and go out and party with his distributors because that's where they got work done, right? They would go out and drink at night and that achieved sales. So, you want to think about that. I like to say that everything we're doing, every step has to tie to revenue. Okay. So I want to be able to say, well, the fact that Ahmed went out every night drinking and spent $5,000 on bar bills, his people sold $7 million. We have fantastic mind share, and that was a very good way to be spending this money on drinking with his distributors because we got great mind share out of it. We got great relationships, right? That said, if I say, if somebody comes to me and says, wow, I want to have this giant, $12,000 laser light show on the booth, it's going to look fantastic. I'm going to say, okay, explain to me how that's going to sell more than having a regular video screen. Walk me through that process. I want to understand this. I want to understand everything we're doing is going to impact sales. And if it doesn't, I don't want to spend the money on it or the time or the energy. Nobody is coming with me to a trade show if I don't think that that person is going to contribute to more revenue. Right? I'm not going to have anything on the booth that isn't going to contribute to more revenue. The giveaways, they better contribute to revenue. The people on the booth, the demo, the food, the coffee, everything should contribute to revenue in the end of the day. Um, we are going to build long-term partnerships at this show. It takes time. I have people who I work with, distributors, who I met at trade shows 30, 35 years ago. When I go to my trade show in November, I go to 3 trade shows a year on a regular basis, plus a dozen or so others that rotate. Some of these shows I've been going to since I was 22, right? 35, 36 years. And I'll go, it's like my high school reunion. I'll see 100 people, 200 people I know I've known for 30 plus years. These shows develop long-term loyalty, right? They really nurture this type of relationship where people, do business. Um, Distributor dinners are generally more revenue and better than booth traffic, right? Because like I used to work with this distributor in Dubai who had more than he was a $1 billion corporation, this distributorship. They had more than 1,000 products in their catalog. And at a 3 night show, I would get him to come to dinner with me twice, right? So all these other principals were at the show, but he came to dinner with me twice. That shows the level of mind share that I had with his organization. And I represented, you know, 1% of his total revenue, maybe not even that, right? But I created a situation of fantastic mind share. Okay. So think about this. Think about the long term, how you're going to develop relationships. Okay. So your checklist, I'm cognizant of time here. I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions at the end. Your checklist, you want to make sure you have your pre-show prep, your booth discipline, and think carefully about your booth discipline. Now, if you're the type of leader who might not run discipline that much, talk to people and say, look, I know I normally don't do this, but for this show, it's very important that we have a little bit more discipline, right? So you want to prepare this, your pre-show prep, your booth discipline, and your structured follow-up. Those are the primary things that are in the end are going to get you, um, get you results. Okay. And then measure your trade shows. Now, you don't necessarily have to close a purchase order at the show. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't close a lot of purchase orders at shows, but I can relate every purchase order to a show, right? So you want to be able to say, because I went to Medica in 2023, I closed 72 deals in 2026, right? That if you can make that chain and you understand that chain and how it works, you're at a really good position. Um, the more discipline you have, the more you're going to grow, and really you're going to use this trade show as you're going to use this trade show as a revenue engine. Okay, and I believe that might be, yep, that's my last slide. I'm going to open this up to questions, discussions, and like I said, I will get notes to everybody at the end. Okay, if you just reach out to me or reach out to Melissa, we'll get notes. And we got through this without any hackers or anything. So that's good for us, Melissa. Cool. Any questions at this point?
Well, while people are thinking about potential questions, I had some kind of contributions of different things I witnessed in North Carolina delegation booths when we have shared booth space. Um, and very interesting that the mechanisms for tracking leads is very personal in some cases if it's not a huge booth where everyone is doing things systematically as Zach described. Usually in a delegation booth there's a lot less people involved, and so your personal choices for what incentivizes you to keep track of your leads better can alter a lot. So one example is certain people that are paper minded. They respond well to tracking things on paper. Zach mentioned the stapler, right? So there's a couple different ways. So I know some colleagues that will come. I even have a colleague, she makes her own books. She makes the binders and stuff, and then she has her own questions. So you could prompt with your, is this a qualified, lead? What questions you're going to ask them when you're starting your conversations. So just make your own personalized book, and then she brings her little stapler, and then she staples a business card and can write notes as she's having the conversation because she prefers to have that in hand. Now there's another company where what they do is they have a salesperson back at home that they're feeding information to as the trade show is happening. And so that person is then taking on the immediate action, the follow up, filling in the gaps. And so they have an electronic kind of spreadsheet connection with the person back at home so that most of the focus can be just go, go, go at the big trade shows. Speaking of the big trade shows, I've been really impressed that some companies, as they're preparing for their ideal list for outreach, they are cognizant of the massive size of some of these shows, and they will organize their foot traffic. So if they're not the person that's designated to being in the booth, they're the person walking the show for the day or for that half of the day. They know what hall they're walking in. So if some of the outreach are to exhibitors, right? So you might be having meetings with people that don't have booths, that are the distributors, some that do have booths. If you are walking the show, every day of the week, they know they're going to hit hall 1 and hall 8 on this day, hall 5 on that day. They come prepared and they know exactly where they're going each day. And that I found was immensely helpful to manage what could otherwise be a very overwhelming experience.
Especially since when you go to like Medica, walking Medica takes about 4 days to do everything, right? So if
Yes.
you don't plan it out, and there's always like, there's a hall that's just mortuary equipment, right? So if that isn't interesting to you, just skip the whole hall. But if you don't plan it out, you just can't get through one of those monster shows if you don't plan well.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said, I like to carry I have clipboards, and I always make sure that for everybody on my team I have clipboards, and there's a specific brand of pen that I like. So I'll always make sure that for everybody on my team I have a clipboard and 3 or 4 of those pens. And one thing I actually didn't mention, which I usually mention when I talk about trade shows, is even before COVID, I always made sure we had hand sanitizer and mints on the booth. And typically I would have like everywhere on the booth, I'd have within hand's reach hand sanitizer and mints. And I would always tell people, whether you think you need them or not, every hour take a mint and sanitize your hands. Even before COVID, because I was once on a show almost 25 years ago when everybody on the show got the flu. And it was horrible because by the last day, nobody could do any work. We were all sick as dogs.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Does anyone have a suggestion or an observation from your own trade show experiences that you could share? Quiet bunch this morning. I don't know. I think that we're frozen a little bit. Zach,
Yep.
you're back.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're
I'm
good.
here. Yeah, I was scared. Actually, I had a lot of slides. I was scared I was going to run over, and we got through a little fast. Um, Again, what I'm going to say is this is really a fantastic way to run growth. But it also, I think a lot of people do this in a way that just isn't very methodical and isn't very well planned out. The more you plan, the earlier you start planning, the more disciplined you are, the more better results you're going to get.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I can parlay that into some EDPNC talking points. Some of you may have already participated in a delegation event or in the future might. And so tracking where your leads come from and ROI is a really critical part of our program. So for instance, these delegation boosts are oftentimes offset in costs through a federal grant. It's called the State Trade Expansion Program grant. It comes from the federal level SBA. My boss and our grant manager work really hard every year putting together a proposal on behalf of North Carolina companies. Now, the only way that we can show impact for the taxpayer dollars that are used to help offset costs, either directly to companies for your own trade show booth, which that's part of the grant offering as well. So if you have your own booth, reach out to me. We'll make sure that you're connected with trade managers to find out how you can potentially offset that cost. But also for the delegation boost, we're trying to offset costs for companies' participation fees as well as additional offsets for the total cost of the booth. But surveys are critical. And so your commitment to an ability to track leads from a specific show and then a year and a half later get a survey and say, oh yeah, we did finalize a distributor, two distributors from that show. We just got that in place. Why don't you touch base with me in another 6 months when we have some sales going? Because if we're able to show definitively ROI, now none of this is personally revealed. When I say personal, I mean your company name isn't revealed. We report only in aggregate, for quarter one, we spent X dollars on this type of grant offering, and this was a total ROI reported. But this is important for you to make your decisions for your own company, but it also parlays into our program being able to sustain and potentially grow because our impact can only be known through you being serious and disciplined and conveying that to us. So it looks like we have some questions here. So Zach, do you want to go ahead and read out loud a question?
oh, just a sec. Wait, chat. I don't know.
No,
Shoot.
I'll read it. Okay, so Charles says, I have been to large expos and conferences and small expos conferences. I've tried to avoid exhibiting at expos with fewer than 10,000 visitors. None of this really works for our products. How do you qualify an expo or conference before visiting it? So that's one question.
Oh,
I don't know. Do you want Charles to talk about the type of product, Zach?
sure. I don't know. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. Great. Yeah, Charles, can you talk a little bit about your product? Charles?
Well, maybe you could
So,
just answer
okay, so
generally.
yeah, so I can just answer. So first of all, in terms of qualifying conferences, very often I'll walk a show before I go to one. And I'll give you an example. Once there was this new trade show that came up, and it was by a good organizer. It looked really good on paper. And when I got there, literally I was like the only person walking the show. Like I got there, on a 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and I'm walking around, and all the vendors are coming out of their booths to look at me because there was nobody else walking around. That's how quiet it was. And I knew that I wasn't going to spend money on that. So I'll usually go and I'll walk shows. I'll see if I can buy a visitor list to see who goes and visits. Because depending on who you're looking for now, are you looking for distributors or are you looking for end users? You might find that it's very difficult to find the right show for your type of end user. Um, like I said, I know people who don't get booths, they'll get a hotel room because they don't want to invest in the booth. I've been with 11 startups over the past 35 years, aside from big companies. So when I've been with startups, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go and walk a show and do meetings in coffee shops, right? I won't invest in shows. So there are ways to game the system, right? But I would hesitate to say that there are very few products that simply don't work at shows, right? That you might be right. There might not be good ROI to have a booth at a show, right? But can you set up meetings without having a booth? Can you do something else, right? So, and I agree, a manufacturer probably doesn't want to be going to a show with less than 10,000 visitors. That's probably right. That's for your distributor to be going to, or somebody who works with you for the most part. Like what I typically say is a regional show your distributor should be paying for, a global show where there are distributors there, that's what you should be paying for. I hope that's helpful. If it isn't, Charles, reach out to me on LinkedIn or shoot me a message or shoot a message to Melissa. I'm going to say my online course probably has 4 hours or more specifically on trade shows. So there's a lot of material on trade shows on that.
Yeah, one other consideration might be, the check of where your competitors are, and then where with your ideal distributor profile, if there are distributors that might be there that have complementary products, like who is going there, and that's what Zach was alluding to with the, trying to figure out the list. But I mentioned in the chat, maybe EDPNCs, so our team, our consultants overseas could help you kind of vet and come up with a strategic list of potential shows. So feel free to reach out to me, and that could be a project. So we can ask consultants specifically to help you narrow down potential shows with the best synergies for you. So you can lean into that. Zach can help you as well. So we have another
Yeah.
question. Oh,
From
go ahead, Zach.
from Adrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar question. So,
Can
Adrian,
you
do you
say the
mind?
question so everyone knows?
Oh, I'm sorry. Your advice is tuned for those who sell products who can reliably get enough customers that you have to prioritize buyers over tire kickers. What would you say to businesses where this isn't the case, where they're questioning whether there would be any, not just sufficient, but literally even $1 return on investment from trade shows? Adrian, do you mind saying, are you saying you sell services? Are you saying that you don't think anybody's interested in showing up to see your products? Are you saying you think it would be difficult to find the right people? What?
And one other question would be timeline, right? Because as Zach said, he doesn't
Right.
expect to have a PO from a trade show. That's not how trade shows work. Trade shows are relationship building. So whoever, is making that decision, what's the timeline for expectation of ROI?
Right.
It,
Well,
it,
we do. My business is in fact one that sells services, and we have tried foreign trade shows. For instance, we exhibited at the Paris Air Show back in 2017, and I am not exaggerating when I say we didn't get even a single dollar of ROI from that. Even in so it's been several years now. We have gotten no orders from that at all, and
Yeah,
I'm
I've
wondering
heard
if
some
that's a
people say
common
shows like
experience
that.
or what.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian. I
I
interrupted you.
didn't
Can you
catch your
please
last
repeat?
sentence, Adrian.
I'm wondering how common that is, because I know that my business is a small business that does services. You're talking products and probably larger businesses than ours. So I'm wondering if there's part of yours that I could take to apply to businesses like mine, or is this just like completely different context?
Well, so I'm a one-man show, right? Basically, I sell services. I sell coaching, training services, and I probably spend 30K a year on trade shows where I have a booth and exhibit, right? And now there are shows where I've been to shows where I haven't gotten a single order from that show, and I've been to shows where I've gotten, four clients from them. And I've been to shows. Look, I was just talking to Melissa. I was at a show last year. I talked to a woman. I sent her a proposal. She didn't get back to me in November. And 10 months later, she reached out to me, and within 2 days, we had closed a contract, right? So there are a lot of different, like, trade shows are places where you meet a lot of people, right? If the model that happened for you once didn't work, the question is, can you shift that model? Can you shift what you were presenting? Can you shift who you're talking to? And then the question also is, well, can you make it affordable so you don't bankrupt yourself doing it, right? Because you can't experiment with $50,000 projects over and over and over again and expect to survive. So, but essentially a trade show is just a place where a lot of people get together, and some of those people you know should be your potential clients. If they aren't, I mean, maybe the Paris Air Show isn't the right place for
Mhm.
you, and maybe a different air show might be, or maybe air shows just aren't the right place for you. But they again, the only what I can say is a trade show is a place where a lot of people get together. So the question is, are the more people you have in one place, the more potential clients you have and the more opportunities you have to pitch. So the question is, I mean, I'll be really frank, Adrian. If you want, just grab that, grab my meeting calendar link, set up a meeting. We can talk through details. I find it hard to believe that we couldn't make some adjustments to what you're doing that would bring you in bet. Like, again, I'm a one-man consulting show. I do trade shows all the time. It's a painful investment. Every time I invest in a trade show, I feel a knot in my belly because it's a hard investment for me to make, but I get return on investment overall pretty well, right? So, I think essentially a trade, like I said, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it's just there are a lot of people at a trade show. It's a matter of finding the right people and doing the right pitches.
Yeah, and Adrian, I would say again, maybe reconnecting with our foreign offices to help you identify things. So even for me as a trade manager covering life sciences, oftentimes my med tech companies are looking for distributors where the biotech companies I'm working with are looking for something different. Maybe they're looking to sell directly into someone, in R&D, clinical studies. It's not going to be the same type of event that works for them. Maybe a smaller conference with a small exhibit for North Carolina that has a really, really robust B2B partnering platform. It's very, very specific to what you're trying to achieve. So I would suggest swing back with our team as well as Zach. Um, and then we do
And
also have a new question that popped up. So
yeah, Michael. So again, I'm happy to chat with you because I think I can solve this problem for you if you want to reach out. But I'll tell you one thing is what triggers. So let's say um, you're looking for German man. I'll just throw this out because I don't know exactly what you do. But let's say you're looking for German manufacturers who want to
oh,
set up.
and that just for the recording purposes, if people watch the recording, they won't be able to see the notes, so I'll read it.
Oh,
Michael,
I'm sorry. I
my
work
business,
for. Oh,
oh yeah, I work for a county government. I will be going to these trade shows to meet with potential leads and sit downs to potentially recruit manufacturers to our area. What's the best route in setting up these international company sit downs with key owners and decision makers?
Yeah, so like I said, Michael, feel free to reach out to me. I can talk you through this. I have some really good ideas for this. But just like, for instance, one of them, right? Let's say you're looking for German med tech companies that are looking to set up in the US, right? Well, for the most part, those are going to be companies that are that have applied or in the process or have FDA, but don't have an office right now in the US. Let's say that's your, your Venn diagram of ideal person to sit with. You can find a list of those in a matter of an hour, right? And then you just reach out to them and say, "Hey, are you going to be at Medica? I'm going to be at Medica. I represent, Cook County, and we'd like to talk to you about why it would be great to set up. Do you have time to meet with me at the show?" And then you do that, you do Germany, Italy, France, you go through the list. That would be the way I would approach this, right? But it's relatively easy to set up.
So Zach, would you go to the FDA.gov website first and do some queries there?
Um, yes, but there are better ways of doing it. Don't want to get, this is what I charge for, Melissa. I don't want to give away my secrets, but, like you can pull together a list of that I could pull together a list of that in an afternoon, right? I do that on a regular basis. So, basically all that, especially now, I don't know if you're dealing with, say, not, people who are, say, furniture manufacturers. They don't have the same government interface that medical manufacturers or pharmaceuticals or even transportation or communications do. But they leave a paper trail someplace, right? So you basically figure out, well, what would be a triggering event? How do I know that somebody might be looking to set up shop in the US? Right. And then how do I find them by doing that? Right. And that's just sort of how you do the research, right?
Right.
Cool. Any other questions?
Well, thank you everyone for staying on the line. We people have asked for the presentations act, so I will make sure everyone
And I'll
gets a
get notes,
copy.
and I'll say this one more time for those of you who might not have been in the beginning. I have really good notes from all 6 presentations. So if you reach out to me by email or by LinkedIn or through my website, I will send you all the notes from from all 6 of the presentations. Or ask Melissa.
Yeah, my email's on there too. So
Yep.
great. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Melissa.